So I'm seeing another factoring problem here, and I'm looking at the expression and I'm seeing four terms, so it looks like we're going to have to use factoring by grouping if we're going to factor this. But before this, here's the kind of twist in this problem. When we look at it, we actually see that when we look at all four of these terms, right, 4, 8, 12, and 24, they actually all share a GCF. Okay, so something isn't completely factored until we break it down and break it down until we can't break it down anymore. So whenever this happens, that you happen to have a GCF at the beginning, you're actually going to have to do that first before you can get into any factoring by grouping or any of the other methods. You always want to try to factor by GCF at the beginning. So in this case, I'm going to say there's a 4c in common that I'm going to remove. And when I remove that 4c, inside I'm left with c cubed minus 2c squared plus 3c minus 6. Okay? So I'm going to say this is the GCF. I factor that out and I have a remainder. So I actually have to now take a look at the inside of the parentheses and see if I can factor that again by using the grouping method. So what I'm going to do is just take a look at this group, and I'm just going to take a look at the other group, okay, and I'm going to try to factor those. So I'm going to leave 4c where it is for now. We're going to bring that down. That has to be in the answer all the way at the end. That's one of the factors. But we're going to forget about it for now and just work with these groups. So if I'm looking inside the red parentheses, I'm seeing that c cubed and 2c squared have c squared in common. Right? That is two of them in those three, and there's also two of them here. And when I try to rebuild this expression, it looks like I have to put a c, right? That's the third c that I need, and it looks like minus 2. Okay? And I'm going to do the same thing with this second group, and I'm going to say it looks like 3c and negative 6. Well, they only have a 3 in common, so I'm going to put plus 3. And then I'm going to say c minus 2. Okay? So this is just doing grouping on the inside of these purple parentheses, the leftover piece after I GCF'd. So I can regroup now. I can say c squared plus 3, right, that's the GCF parts, and then the common c minus 2, well, that's going to be a part of the factors. And then this 4c that was out here, that's also going to be out front. Okay, so don't forget to bring down the 4c. If you want to use big box brackets so you can tell the difference, you can put a big box around this and bring 4c down with every step. Right? And so I would say that this expression actually has three factors: the GCF and the two that came out of factoring by grouping. Right? So some of these are going to be a little bit more challenging because you're going to have that GCF at the beginning before you start grouping. Here's a second example of factoring by grouping where there's a GCF involved. So if I looked at these four terms, again, I know it's grouping because there's four terms. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say I see a 3, a 12, a 15, and a 60. And they all have a GCF. This is 3 times 1, 3 times 4, 3 times 5, 3 times 20. So they do have a 3 in common. And I can look at them and say they all also have an E in common because in each term there is at least one E. So there is a GCF that I should remove. See, but we're going to do this example and we're going to pretend like we forgot. If we just started grouping right away and just said, all right, this is the grouping method, 4 terms, right? That's a group and this is a group. We're going to see what happens if we forget to take out the GCF. Right? We're going to proceed and look at the end and see where that 3e ends up. Right? So in this first group here, I'm going to say, well, yeah, 3e to the 4th and 12e to the 3rd. Well, the 3 and the 12, they have a 3 in common, and it looks like there are 3 e's in common, so I can say e to the 3rd. That's the GCF, 3e to the 3rd. And it looks like in order to turn 3e to the 3rd into e to the 4th, well, that's 1e. And to turn 3e to the 3rd into 12e to the 3rd, well, that's just times 4. Okay? And then in my second group, it looks like I have 15 and 60. All right, well, they share a 15. This is 15 times 1, and this is 15 times 4. So I'm going to say they have 15 in common. 15, okay? And then they have 1e in common, so I need to take that out as well. And then when I rebuild this, I'm going to be left with e minus 4 again. right? Because 15e squared and 60e will come out of that second distribute. Okay, so let's do our regroup. This is what we would usually do with factoring by grouping. 3e to the third plus 15e, right? Those are my GCFs, so they go into a parentheses together. And e minus 4 would be the other one, and that is matching, right? So I can say that that's the second factor. Okay? So remember, the definition of factoring is keep breaking down this expression until you can't break it down anymore. Right? So we're going to actually take a look at this result and say, wait a second, we're not done. This first factor, 3 and 15, well, they have a 3 in common, so I actually have to GCF just the first factor. Right, and I also see an e here, so I'm going to say, well, I got to take that e out. And when I do that, I'm going to get e squared, okay, plus 5, right? And then the e minus 4 that was, sitting there already, that's not going to change at all, so that's also part of the factor. Okay? So if you notice, at the beginning we said they had 3e in common, and we chose not to remove that 3e. We just started factoring by grouping. So if you ever forget and you don't look at GCF, that GCF is going to show up in one of your factors at the end. This first one had the 3e in it, and then we had a GCF it there. Okay, so whether you GCF at the beginning or you GCF at the end to one of your factors, you do have to do it, but you have the option of doing it at the beginning or the end. And if you forget to do it at the beginning, you can take a look at the end and see that that factor is there. Okay, so that's two different ways that you could do it. Start with the GCF and then factor by grouping, or you can forget about the GCF at the beginning and then factor by grouping at the end. You'll get the same result. This is going to be the same answer as if we had to pull out the 3e at